Hope you're having a good night. We're going to go through one of our really wonderful, I feel like this is just so perfect for especially for you folks that are fostering and adopting kiddos. Tonight we're going to be looking at trust-based relational interventions and some things that fit very well with that tonight. So if you have done the TBRI, Trust-Based Relational Interventions trainings, tonight will just be a great review for you and maybe an opportunity to practice a few of the things, brush up on a few of those that maybe you haven't seen or thought about for a while. For those of you who are just hearing this for the first time, trust-based relational interventions, this is really the gold standard in terms of working with kids who have had disrupted attachments for one reason or another. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is as we get moving forward. But before we go, before we move forward, we're going to start with a nice parenting mindfulness moment. And tonight we're going to work on some grounding exercises. This may be a great thing to do right now if you've got a lot of like buzzing energy in the house right now and kids that are kind of bouncing off the walls and you've had a few days of changed schedules and things like that. This can be a great moment to just kind of get centered, get grounded. I recommend this, especially when maybe there's been a big meltdown, something that's big that's happened in the household, to get yourself back to that green brain, that regulated state of executive functioning. Being able to take a moment to just get grounded wherever you are can be a good thing. So I'm going to walk you through a few of the exercises that are actually in your workbook and then one that's actually not. So we'll be able to move forward with that. So first activity we're going to do is the push and pull on the chair activity, and this is outlined in your workbook. So this is a great one you can do if you're sitting somewhere or go take a seat somewhere. What you're going to do is really practice noticing the tension between your body pushing and pulling on something. So you can put your feet kind of on the ground, and you can grab the bottom of your seat. And what you're going to do is you're going to try pushing and pulling at the same time. So you're going to push with your feet and pull with your hands. And just notice that tension. Notice how opposite it is, how with your arms you're pulling upwards. With your legs you're pushing downwards. Take a big deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, and relax. And just kind of notice what happens with that tension. All that tension that was stored up in your legs and all that tension that was in your arms, with just taking about a minute or so doing the pushing and pulling exercise can be super helpful. So the next thing that I would recommend is finding a focal point. For your kiddos who struggle with anxiety, some of your kids who may have panic attacks, or even you yourself, if this is something that you notice, that tension, that buzzing energy that kind of rises up to the surface, it gets really easy to kind of lose focus, lose your concentration, even in the room that you're in sometimes. So finding a focal point anywhere in the room. I like finding kind of cross beams. If you can find a chair or tiles on the wall or the edge of your refrigerator, something where one point meets another, and just kind of focus. Just look at the sharpness of those lines. Notice how one is going up and maybe one is going another direction, and how they meet right there in the middle. And just let your attention focus on one thing, and notice how everything else tends to kind of just disappear. It kind of just floats away, even if just for a moment. And you get that nice relaxation, that good focus on one specific thing. Again, take your big, deep cleansing breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, and relax. The next one is fairly similar, but instead of one thing, this is called the 5 things game. And I've used this with my own kids. I've used this with kids that I've worked with, especially kids who deal with anxiety or can tend to get a little dysregulated, can get overly excited, and kind of, again, like there's too much stimuli happening around them. So what you do with this one is you just kind of go through the five senses, as many as you need to, and work on doing some focusing. So that the first one is the easiest one to go to is just the eyes. So with your sense of sight, notice 5 things around you. I would even do this in sets of 5 sometimes if the kid is really agitated, or even if you're agitated, noticing 5 things that you can see. Well, I see this. I see a chair over there. I see a camera. I see the lights. I see the tiles on the floor. Oh, I even see my shoe down there. And I see my computer. Then you would move to the next sense. Sound is a really good one, because for that one you have to get yourself in kind of a calm and quiet space. So if there's a lot of agitated breathing, or even a lot of noise or words that are happening, even if there's tears happening and there's a big sad moment and you're working on that regulation piece, just what are 5 things you can hear? It's harder. It's a lot more difficult than the sight thing, because you really, really have to focus to find 5 different things you can hear. But you will. You'll notice if you take that moment and just listen. Right now in your home, try it. What are 5 things that you can hear right now? Were you able to do it? I hope so. I was able to do it even in here. Sometimes even just the sound of your own breath, if you can't focus on anything else, have the child notice it. Notice what it sounds like. The air going in through their nose and out through the mouth. Always go back to the breathing. If things get tough, try the big deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. If all of those fail, you can even try going to the tapping, do your butterfly hug, or on the arms or on the legs like we've mentioned. And the last one I'm going to guide you through just a quick, just a couple of minute kind of guided meditation on a grounding exercise. So what I'd like for you to do right now, wherever you are, get in a good cozy place, good comfy place. And if you can, get your feet on the ground, on the floor. And put your hands, either you can do palms up if that feels good, or palms down on your thighs, whichever works well for you. And if you feel comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. Take a few big, deep, cleansing breaths. And I'd like for you to notice your feet right now. I want you to try to notice the place where your foot meets your sock inside your shoe. See if you can notice where it meets. It's something you never pay attention to. Give that a try. See if you can notice that place. Or if you're not wearing shoes, notice how the ground feels to your feet right now, the carpet or the tile or the wood. Then just take a few deep breaths again and notice how solid the ground feels under your feet right now. If you're sitting somewhere, just notice how firm the ground is under your feet, or the chair is under you. Just notice that slight tension between yourself and the ground beneath you. And I want you to imagine just that solid strength underneath your feet, just moving all the way up your legs and your calves, to your knees, your thighs, up through your waist and your core, through your hands and your arms, your chest, all the way up to the tip top of your head. Just notice how grounded you feel right now. There's strength beneath you, holding you up. Imagine that strength just giving you what you need for right now. Take another big, deep, cleansing breath. Nicely done. All right. Well, I hope you're in a good space for some learning now. Hopefully we're kind of in a good, focused place. And a few things of housekeeping before we go into our next parts here, now that you're good and grounded. First of all, your feedback is really, really appreciated. Within the next week or so, I'm going to be sending out some feedback forms through the email list. It takes maybe a minute, maybe not even that much to do, but if you could give us some feedback, that really helps with continuing these programs, and it helps us get them better and serve you better and through what we do. Also, I wanted to make sure, I've had a few people asking about the distance learners. So those of you who have been streaming the program online, we will definitely make sure that you get credit for those. So also in an email coming up in the next week, you'll be getting some instructions about that. There's a little Google form that you'll go and fill out, and you'll check a box next to each week that you've attended virtually, meaning you've streamed it either on the live cast or you streamed it some other time during the week. And then there's just a question or two about each of those things. And when you submit that in, we will make sure you get all of the credit for all the classes that you went to. Also, certificates will be available at the last class. If you're here on site, we can have those for you ready to roll, or by email if it's requested as well. We'll also have them if neither of those work for you. If you'd like to do it through to come up and get them at CAFA, that's fine as well. Also, keep on learning. Stay connected. The website, I'm continuing to update it constantly. Again, all the videos that we show, if you like things like we're watching during these weeks, I have lots more videos up there, and these videos, if you'd like to keep watching them as well. Also, there are links to websites. So Karen Purvis's website on trust-based relational interventions through TCU there's links to that. There's links to collaborative problem solving. I just sent out a link this past week and an email to the play therapy research website. So you can go and see all the great research that's been done on that. So just keep active, keep learning, and boy, it's a lot of fun. Okay, well, tonight we are kind of putting all the pieces together. Next week is going to be a little bit different. Next week is one that we have not done at any location so far. It's going to be really specific to fostering and adopting kids. So next week is going to cover kind of the grief and loss involved in being a foster parent and or being an adopted parent as well. So I hope you'll be back for that last class. It's going to be a really, really special one. But tonight we're going to get more specific tools on how to work with your kiddos, some things from the TBRI model and a few others like it that will get us hopefully get us some traction with our kids, get things working well with them when we're consistently having some difficulties. So the first thing I want you to think about, and this actually comes from the conscious discipline model, is this idea of behavior being either a distraction or a communication. If you view behaviors that your kids are doing as a distraction or as a disruption to your life, to your household, you will treat them and engage them as if it's a distraction and or disruption to your household, which if you do that, you're immediately in a power struggle. You know, you've got your concern, the kid's concern, and if it's looking like, well, they're just trying to ruin your night, ruin your evening, ruin your household, it's going to feel like, well, either I'm no good at parenting or they're no good as a kid. And what I'm going to propose tonight is neither of those is true. Neither of those is accurate. That, can we get better at parenting? Of course, we always can. Can kids learn new behaviors and get better at the things that are hard for them? Absolutely. I mean, that's what this is all about. But if our only interpretation of why they're doing what they're doing is that it's a personal attack against us, or it's some sort of willful sort of devious scheme to undermine the stability of your household, it puts you on the defensive really easy. You're easy to go to that, at least down to your blue brain, that is really vulnerable to insult. And it's easy to feel insulted when that's our interpretation. So what we're going to propose is what Dr. Becky Bailey from Conscious Discipline says is maybe all of these behaviors are actually communication. Maybe they're communication of, I'm missing a skill, That's pretty obvious, right? A behavior is present when a skill is missing. It might also represent that a kid is not having some sort of basic need met, either an attachment need or a physical need, a need for felt safety that you may not even know about. You may not know that it's going on at all, but their behavior is communicating something's not right here. Something is missing. So when we start looking at behaviors, instead of just disruptions or distractions as actual communications, then we go to that curious place, right? We feel that security within ourselves. Hey, I've got an okay kid who has got some skills that are missing and has had some disruptions to their life they didn't ask for. And I'm doing the best I can as a parent. I've got some skills, and I'm always learning more. But maybe there's something here that we need to get worked out. When that's the case, we're going to look at how to do some intervening with those missing skills, with those behavior problems, in ways where you feel like you're actually have some stability in the household. You know, where standards are being met, and you're actually you're gaining some ground. You know, things are getting better, and this is a big and you're building trust with your kid. You're building connection. You're building trust. You are completing attachment cycles every time these behaviors come up, because you're looking at them as communication. And remember, all attachment happens when there's, number one, a felt need. The child has a need for something. Number two, they express that need, sometimes in really great and really effective ways, sometimes in terribly dysfunctional and ways that are really, really problematic to themselves and everyone else, but it's still a communication, right? Think back to the baby crying, doing the best they can to get that attachment need met. They're not very good at communicating, so they do what comes natural. So a child who's had broken attachment after broken attachment after broken attachment and is not good at connecting with their grown-ups is probably going to have some fairly dysfunctional means for getting those felt needs met. So they're communicating. How we respond to that determines if that attachment cycle is met or not. They have a felt need. They express that need. What do we do when they express that need? So if we understand that these really challenging behaviors may be a form of communication, we're going to listen. We're going to get curious, and we're going to figure out what's going on, and we're going to intervene. We might need to set some limits. We might need to have some consequences. We are going to look at some of that tonight. So consequences, control, timeouts, manipulation, lying, and even setting limits, how to say no with style and with grace. So remember, parenting with insight means knowing yourself and understanding your child. So know your triggers going into this. If you're hearing the shark music happening and you know that your lid is flipped, that's a great moment to get yourself regulated. Do some of the techniques that we've tried for self-regulation. Get yourself into that green zone. Everything that we're going to look at tonight, if done in the green zone, you're going to get so much more for your effort. Everything that we mentioned tonight also, if you do this from a place of a flipped lid or even that red zone survival state, it's likely to even escalate the situation rather than bringing it down. So remember that practice green zone parenting. The best interventions for negative behaviors always start with a calm, regulated parent. So, how to build connection in ways that build trust also. So we're building connection, we're setting limits, but we're also building trust. This comes out of the trust-based relational interventions model. As I mentioned, Dr. Karen Purvis and David Cross were the ones that kind of pioneered this. Dr. Purvis actually passed away a few years ago, but she was just a giant in this field. And as you watch some of the videos tonight and see her legacy still living on, just what a powerful force for good she has been in this world, as specifically to kids who come from what she calls hard places, kids who have had those life disruptions, have had the negative, the traumas and the negative attachment cycles. So I recommend this book a lot. This is a great one. If you don't have it yet, find it, buy it, listen to it on audiobook. There's links to this on the website also. Can't say enough great things about this book. This will give you a lot more of the kind of nuts and bolts and details. So if this feels good tonight, that'd be a good place to start. Their website is also rich with videos and with workbooks and all sorts of things that can help you through the process. So as we're talking about this, I'm going to think about this in terms of big T trauma and little T trauma as well, because I feel like this works well for either. And I'm going to make a distinction here. The big T trauma are the ones that we can really see. These are the things like the abuse, the neglect, sexual abuse, physical assault towards kids. Those big ones that we can really tell. It's part of the story. They're very, very obvious. However, we'd also throw in there big T traumas, things like natural disasters, even like grief and loss, death, dying, those sorts of things. Some of that can be really traumatic for children to deal with as well. But there's also what's called like the little T traumas, and those are just the cumulative effect of a lot of hard things about life. This could be things like just the culture that a kid lives in, bullying. Well, bullying could be big T or little t, depending on what it looks like. But for some kids, just getting up and going to school, their feelers are already up, and their stress level is already a bit higher. So even things like kind of poverty, systemic racism, microaggressions, a lot of those things, even where you folks who have are fostering kids and you take them to the grocery store and there's some kind of awkward question that someone asks about the kid, or even that question, is this your real kid? That's an aggression. That's something where a kid can take that in and it can feel really yucky, or having to make those sorts of explanations out in public settings, or family members who don't quite get it sometimes, like we talked about last times. Those are great moments to try the wish you well that we talked about last week, when people just don't get it. But realize those things kids hear way more than we realize, especially kids who have highly tuned ears, because the trauma has led them to a place where that's been survival for them. So Dr. Purvis put on camps for kids and did counseling programs and did a lot of research around this idea of trust-based relational interventions. And she found a lot of things that were really valuable for us to know. Things like the excitatory chemicals in a child's body when they've been under stress for a long time are there. So it's a lot more likely to get the flipped lids or get the meltdowns because of some of the biochemistry that's going on. And so she did a lot of work around how to get that going better. So the model is based on 3 principles. And everything that is involved in those, everything from play to problem solving to discipline, can promote connection, trust, attachment, positive behaviors, brain growth, and enjoyment of the relationship. And that's really my biggest one that I love. So think about this in terms of these principles. So there's empowerment. This has to do with giving kids choices, helping them feel safe, not just be safe, because they're probably safe in your home. But feeling safe is something different than that. And sometimes kids need some empowerment in terms of how they feel safe, their ability to make some choices for themselves, their ability to even ask hard questions, their ability to get food when they need it, those sorts of things. So attention to physical needs are the answer to that empowerment question. Connection is another basic principle of TBRI. It's all about connecting with your child. I mean, the book is called The Connected Child. So you see how it just permeates everything about the model. So attention to attachment needs. This is all about connecting with your kiddo, meeting those attachment needs from the moment they walk in your house, the very first time. Seeing the world through their eyes. Think back weeks ago to your own roots and your branches, your trees, and what your house looks like. So like what touch is like in your household, what communication is like, how needs are met, discipline style, all of those things, and realize that a child coming into your home for the first time knows none of that. They've got to learn an entirely new culture the moment they walk in your door. So being really upfront about meeting those connection needs, that you are there. They can ask any question. They can ask lots of questions. You might need to give them a tour of the house, let them know where the food is, let them know how you lock the doors at night, all those sorts of things, and spending every possible moment connecting with that child, especially in those first moments as possible. And it'll change the longer they're with you. And even if it moves into an adoption situation, or you're adopting your child from the get-go, really focusing on those attachment needs is the heart of what these interventions are about. But also, she pays a lot of attention to correction. So empowerment, connection, correction. Correction is attending to the behavioral needs. So this is where you really look at these behaviors in terms of a communication. We don't want to ignore behaviors. We don't want to, because that's basically saying a child's trying to communicate something to us, and we're saying that doesn't matter. I'm focused on my other stuff. You dismissive attachment styles out there, you got to pay a lot of attention to that. That's a really easy one for us to do. Don't want to kind of disconnect. Okay, you're doing your thing, I'll do my thing. Let's just let that happen. Correction means that we're paying attention. We're watching. We're watching when those behaviors happen. And sometimes we're going to do some plan C's, and we're going to avoid power struggles. We're going to remove expectations sometimes to keep the household going well. But even when you do those, you are doing it mindfully, and you're doing it with communication. You are not just ignoring the child. So correction is super important. Pay attention to those behavioral needs. Remember, they're telling you something. They need something. They're missing a skill. They need you to teach them how to do it well. They have some sort of attachment need that they're not good at communicating. You're there to help them figure it out. Use those correction moments to do that. And I love this too. So relationship is the intervention within TBRI. Relationship. It always comes back to that. So whether we're communicating, we're correcting, we're connecting, we're empowering, all of those things are for the purpose of improving and increasing the relationship with our kiddos. And as I mentioned before, she talked about the brain chemistry piece of this, and she realized that this is not just kind of a cognitive sort of model where we're going to think differently and we're going to tell our kids things and they're just going to get it and everything is going to be fine. What she found was that you're fighting an uphill battle. Those brain chemicals, those excitatory hormones, the cortisol, the adrenaline, the norepinephrine, all of those things that increase the excitatory experience of the kid, you're fighting against all of that too. It's not just your child. It's their neurotransmitters and the wiring in their brain. So to just deal with this as like a behavioral issue where I'm just going to give enough rewards or put this behavioral Band-Aid or ground the kid and think everything is going to get better, probably not going to happen until we start addressing that underlying brain chemistry. So a few suggestions around starting to change the brain chemistry for your kids. First of all is providing felt safety. Everything that you're doing is about helping the kid to feel safe, not just be safe. So again, they're safe under your roof, but they need to feel safe. They need to know where the exits are. They need to know who's in charge. They need to know when things are going to happen and when things are going to change. They might need special reminders around schedule changes, or if, like we've had a snow day the last few days, and you know what, the schedule that we used to have and that we've always had is going to be a little bit different over the next few days or so, kiddo. And you know what? You can't control it and I can't either. But we're going to do our best to be able to work through this together. So you're going to help them feel safe, even when the world feels a little bit not so safe. The next thing is nutrient-rich foods, providing foods for kiddos that are helpful to helping those excitatory chemicals kind of calm themselves. So paying attention to making sure they're getting enough protein, making sure that it's not just Cheetos and Pop-Tarts all the time. And some kids, and this will be tough because if kids have come from a place where that's what food is Cheetos and Pop-Tarts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you see see how their body gets so used to kind of the craving those carbs and the sugars and the things that kind of get you amped up really quickly and then drop down equally as quickly, and you need that constant sort of rush. So being mindful and careful, because sometimes you will need to have some of those really safe feeling foods for them. I mean, maybe you're going to do some Pop-Tarts for a while you're building the attachment thing, but try to introduce some apples, a slice of cheese, maybe some nuts, some salmon, something with some omega-3, something that kind of helps with the myelination of the brain. Those sorts of things are really good. But also making sure your kiddos are hydrated. Hydration has a huge part to play in emotional regulation. And it's interesting, I've heard recently that Americans are chronically dehydrated. We just don't drink enough water, myself included. It's so much easier even just to drink, the coffees or the teas or the soda, and those things have some water in them, but it's not giving you really the hydration that you need. So making sure that our kiddos are hydrated. Feeling dehydrated is a good trigger to an emotional meltdown. So a lot of good food, make sure they're hydrated, appropriate exercise. If they've got a lot of adrenaline and cortisol bouncing through their system just because life is stressful, having some outlets is going to be really important. So some things to do: appropriate exercise, get them involved in something, go out in the backyard and run around with them, play, throw the frisbee, throw the baseball, take walks around the neighborhood. If they're kids who can do sports, that would be great, something that's regular and that's routine that they can continue to be a part of, and they kind of have to show up because they're part of the team. A little extra pressure sometimes to get a kiddo out the door could be helpful. So all of those things, so like regular exercise actually helps to regulate the cortisol levels in our bodies. So that good stress hormone that we need it when it's there, if we do regular exercise, we're more likely to have the right amount rather than too much or too little. So burning off some of the excess energy can be really good. Environmental regulation of emotions. So we're going to regulate the emotions even just through kind of the environment, making sure the environment feels safe, it feels calm, and that our household is an environment of regulated emotions, that they're seeing their grown-ups not perfect all the time, because you won't be, but a grown-up who's able to move from regulated, like I'm feeling okay, to dysregulated, where I'm a little bit losing it here, back to regulated again. That process is so important for kids to see, especially the younger they are, even in babies, being in households where they see a parent able to move across from regulated to dysregulated and back to regulated again, helps build the components in their brain that help them do self-regulation. So having an environment where emotions are regulated well, again, not perfect, but regulated when they need to be is super important. So as the brain starts to change and we're building this process, we're realizing it's a step-by-step thing here. We're going to start off with external regulation. This means that you're doing all the regulation to start with. That means that they may not have the capacity, the facilities, the skills, or the ability to regulate themselves by themselves. So it may mean we get our lid down, and we do our name it to tame it, and we do our connect and redirect, and we engage, don't enrage, and we're doing all of those things to help co-regulate the kiddo. Remember, their lid's flipped, ours comes down, and they borrow our calm. They may need that to start off with. It may be just you starting it, but it's going to lead to co-regulation, where you're working on this together. You're building some practices and you're building some skills where they trust you, and you're being trustworthy with them. And you're walking them through the steps of, this is how we regulate, kiddo. These are some things we need to do to get things in a good place. And then once that happens, and only after that happens, does that lead to self-regulation. So a child being able to regulate themselves by themselves. This doesn't really happen outside the context of relationship. They need to feel it. They need to breathe it. They need to be all about that happening around them as it goes. So remember, a lot of external regulation to start with, then some co-regulation together, then moving into self-regulation. All right, we're going to look at a video here, Dr. Karen Purvis, talking a little bit about kind of the parenting style, and also a little bit about correction and connection. So watch this and see what you think about what she has to say about good skills and strategies from the parent side, how to connect, how to correct in positive ways.
One of my greatest sources of sadness in the church ministry for children from hard places is that there is a great deal of punitive practice that bears the guise of the heart of God. I don't believe that it's God's desire to bruise and to wound and to injure and to re-traumatize our children. We have so many children who don't feel safe in their families. So many children who don't understand how they're loved because parenting practices are harsh and punitive. In our work, we say there are disconnected parenting strategies and there are connected parenting strategies. We want to use the connected strategies. We believe that's the heart of God. Some parents may have been led to believe when I finish disciplining a child, they should be frustrated and angry because I've thwarted that sin that's within them. But if I understand the way that God loves me and disciplines me, when God disciplines me, my behavior is changed. I feel more connected to Him than I did before. And I feel more content because I know of His love for me. That's what I want my children to have when I work with them. Now, some parents will say, well, that's not what happens at our house. So we say, think about 3 connected words, 3 disconnected words. When you finish discipline, is the behavior deferred? They just do it again when you're not looking? Are you and the child more discontent with your relationship? Do you feel more disconnected? If you see those 3 Ds, I'd encourage you to explore the heart of God and how He disciplines us. When we finish working with a child, we want the behavior, we want 3 Cs. We want the behavior changed, corrected. We want that child to be more connected to us than they were before. And we want that child to be content because they have succeeded. And I know that as a caregiver, I'll be more content because I empowered that child to succeed. One of the most common questions that we get from parents is, what about consequences? Well, I understand that consequences are a fact of life. There are consequences. There are good consequences for some behaviors, and there are not so much fun consequences for some behaviors. But I'm not a fan of families using consequences as their primary means of correction and discipline. Now, sometimes I use consequences, but a cycle that begins in families is parents who are focused on consequences for discipline begin to see the child's misbehavior and they assign a punishment, misbehavior, punishment, misbehavior, punishment. And before long, we're driving worse behaviors because the child doesn't feel understood, doesn't feel felt, the child doesn't feel connected. In many ways, our parents unwittingly become the warden, not the coach. So if a child says to me something mouthy, I would prefer to do a redo. Try it again, buddy. That's not how we talk to each other. And then when that's over, it's over. But if I give a child a consequence that they wait till evening to fulfill or they're grounded for 3 weeks, I create a negative cycle with my child. Now, I don't want to misguide you. I'm very diligent about behavior. I'm very proactive about helping children learn new behavior. But if I can do it through playful engagement, if I can do it through, try it again, buddy, I can very often align with my child in the way that they know I'm their advocate, I'm their coach, I'm their ally. And I'm going to help them face down anything that happened to them before they came to me. We're going to do it together. For many years, researchers have known that there's 4 basic styles of parenting. One's a neglectful parent, they're just not there. One's a permissive parent, they let the kids make all the decisions. One's a dictatorial parent, called authoritarian parent, they make all the choices. But the parenting style that yields the greatest outcomes for the lifespan for a child is called authoritative parenting. And that's where there is some shared power. That's where the parents don't hold the children hostage, the children don't hold the parent hostage. That's where the children don't get to make all the choices, the parents don't make all the choices, but they work together. And so when I say to my grandchild, not what do you want to wear tomorrow or what do you want to do with the day, but would you want to wear this dress or this dress, I empower them to practice making good choices. When I say, would you like to go to the park or go to the zoo? I give them limited set of good choices, and I'm empowering them to learn to make choices. Many of our parents don't want our children to have choices until they walk out the door to college. And those are children who've not got practice with making good choices. I'm going to empower a 2-year-old. Do you want juice or milk? I'm going to empower an 8-year-old. Do you want the crayons or the markers? I'm going to empower the adolescent at every age, giving choices, age-appropriate choices, not giving the power all to the child, but sharing power with the child so that they learn how to appropriately use power. We very often will encourage families to try compromise with their child. Well, that's a little bit of heresy in some families, because how can you share power in that way? But if you look at the attachment relationship of a mother and a child or a father and a child, you would just want to sit down and have a cup of tea and a cookie, but that baby wakes up, you're going to give up what you want, you're going to go to that child. Every new parent just wants a few hours of sleep. But if your baby wakes up and cries, you go to your child. You share power for making choices. One of the most profound things we can teach our children is that we're going to work with them. Now, sometimes they have to accept no. But if I can share power with my child, appropriate levels, I'm not talking about letting the child take me hostage, but neither do I want to take the child hostage. If I can let that child weigh in, and if I can give a choice, give a compromise, I'm going to. And in that way, I strengthen my relationship to the child. And in that way, I strengthen the child's knowledge that I'm their coach and that I'm their advocate. And in that way, I strengthen my child's ability to heal.
Empowered to Connect, her website that was on there, highly recommend checking that out if this is something that you're interested in. So she really is talking about different styles of doing parenting. I love her analogy of being the warden or the coach. Are we going to constantly have to nitpick every little thing that becomes misbehavior, consequence, which leaves us, again, at that place of a power struggle and kind of can reinforce some of those negative means of getting your needs met for kiddos, as opposed to the coach. Now, I love the analogy of a coach. I mean, coaches are people who get the very best out of someone else. And think about the track coaches over at U of O and seeing the Olympic trials and seeing some of these just globally rated athletes who still need a coach. And they've got someone that's there to help pull them, even as high functioning as they are, to do even better than they were before. So think about that with your parenting. In terms of being a coach, you've got a kiddo who's maybe missing some skills, maybe some things are not going well, and you're there to get the absolute best out of them. But it doesn't always happen easily. It does. Coaching is hard. It's hard work. It takes more mental focus, takes more thought to be a coach style of parent than it does to be a warden. With a warden, it's just path of least resistance. It's simple. It's here's the rule, you break it, you get this, on to the next. As opposed to a coach that says, I want to figure out why this is going on. And if you're a coach that gets right down there with your kiddo, it's we are going to be able to work on this, and I bet you we can figure this out. So think about her 3 Ds and her 3 Cs of intervention with kids. Is the behavior just deferred until later? With just crime and punishment system, it's likely that when the reinforcer, positive or negative, is there, you'll get a behavior that you're wanting or not the behavior that you don't want, as opposed to it just happening later. Now, think about this. I don't know if anyone else does this, but sometimes when I'm like on my way to Portland, my foot will get a little bit heavy. I mean, between here and there is long, straight stretches of road, and sometimes I get going maybe a little bit faster than I should. Maybe I'm up above the speed limit there. What happens if I see the police officer? My behavior changes immediately. There's some external motivation, right? However, when I leave, there's a little confession here. After I pass the speed trap and I don't get pulled over, sometimes my behavior goes back to what it was before, and sometimes my foot gets a little heavy because what happened? My external motivator is gone. This is not about internal motivation. This is about external motivation. Same with our kids. If it's only about, if your only tool and your only strategy is external motivation, it will work. You can get behaviors changed for a while, but it has to have that external motivator to do it. So if it's purely the warden style, the behavior is often deferred until later. The child feels discontent. It's about you versus them. They're in the wrong, and they're going to feel it. And the parent and child a lot of times feel disconnected through this process, as opposed to the coaching style, where the behavior is actually changed, right? I mean, we want our long jumpers jumping longer than they were before, not shorter. So we're going to run them through the paces, and we're going to teach them some skills and some steps to jump longer if they're a long jumper. If they're a kid, if they're a child, we're going to teach them how to regulate their emotions. We're going to teach them some flexibility skills. We're going to teach them communication strategies and how to connect using words rather than just actions and behaviors. But that takes time, right? It takes some skill. It takes more effort on your part. But that changes the behavior from the inside. Internal motivation is going to get you a lot more in the long run. When you're doing this, also your child feels content. They feel like, wow, this person is out for my best interest. They care that things get better. They're not just ignoring me like has happened before. They care enough to correct what's going on. But I feel like we can do this, right? We can work together to get things happening. And the parent and the child feel connected. It's a, hey, kiddo, let's work on this together. You and I. Let's fix this. I bet we can do this. So this is the difference between, so if it's an issue around screen time, the kid was doing too much screen time or was not getting ready for school like they were supposed to or something like that, warden steps in and says, okay, that's it. No screens for a week. That's their intervention, is we're just going to take away your thing. That's what that style looks like. As opposed to the coach that says, okay, I see what you did. I see this is not going well for you. This is not going well for me. Let's work together to fix this so that this doesn't keep happening. You see how it's teamwork. It's working together. It's saying, I see you. I care about what's happening, and we want to get this happening better. It's going to take some work, but I'm here for you. I'm here to help this get better for you. So, redo. She mentioned that in passing, but this one is so powerful for our kiddos, especially our very impulsive, our hyperactive, our kids who are missing some executive functioning skills, don't think ahead very well. Redo is awesome because it recognizes the thing that they did wrong, and it gives them an immediate opportunity to make it right, to fix it, to get it better. So they're immediately going from the place of, wow, I blew it again, to, I fixed it. I made it right. And all is right in our relationship again, and we're in a good space. So it's pretty simple, like when she said, the kids using some sassy words or some unkind words. Ooh, hey, let's try that again, but this time use kind words. This time with respect. Let's try that again. Or, wow, that door got slammed pretty hard just then. Let's try that again. let's try it using gentle hands. Let's try it with some respect. Or wow, looks like you're feeling angry and you slam the door. Would you like to try that again? Are there some ways you'd like to let me know you're feeling angry? Do you have some words you need to tell me to let me know you're feeling angry rather than showing me with your actions? You see how it's just right there in the moment. We're not letting a whole lot of time pass. It's quick, it's easy, they've fixed it, and you're ready to move on with your life. And it sends that message that everyone makes mistakes. Looks like you did right then and there. And then I caught you, and I make mistakes too. Here's your chance to fix the mistake and get things going well. So you catch these mistakes, but also just throw out there too, catch them being good. Catch them when things are going well. Notice the things that are going well, not just the things that aren't going well. So redos are great, but also pay attention to those things. So what I want you to do now, page 62 in your workbook, I want you to actually take a look at that if you have it right there. If not, just take a moment, maybe write on a notepad or something, or even just take some moment to reflect on this question here. This is an activity about empower. So tonight we're going to look at empowering, connecting, and correcting for our activities. So I want you to take just a moment and brainstorm a few ways you can offer your child more opportunities to make his or her own choices. Think about that idea when she mentioned sharing power. So they don't hold you hostage, but you don't hold them hostage either. Are there some appropriate ways you can share power with your child? So think about the message that it sends when you allow some personal power through making some choices in the household. So take just about a minute and work on that, and then we'll keep moving and talk about some timeouts. Here we go. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is the classic consequence of timeouts, giving timeouts. I understand that this may be sacred ground for a lot of us out there, and if timeouts work well for you, and that's something that's kind of has worked great, that's I'm not saying you can never ever do timeouts again. What I am saying is think about specifically kids from hard places, kids who have had those life disruptions. They may need something a little different. Or it may be that your kiddo needs some extra connection for lots of reasons. This technique, it takes timeout, like the idea of timeout, and it flips it just a little bit. So you're still doing a lot of the same things with some extra added connection pieces there. So we're going to watch this video, think about how this might work with your kids.
Time in versus time out is a concept that many families find richly rewarding, although initially challenging. When my child misbehaves and I say, go away from me until you can behave, I'm forgetting the fact that they need me as the parent to help them learn to regulate. So if their brain didn't mature because they didn't have a parent to regulate their needs, now I'm sending a child who emotionally needs connection and who cognitively needs direction, and now I'm sending them alone until they can succeed. Beyond unreasonable if you think about it in terms of brain development. So our goal is to say, rather than the parent who says, you're not acting like part of our family, take your food to your room until you want to be a family boy, and then you can come back to the table. Well, in the first place, I want to say, sweet, precious Father in heaven, when did my little boy misbehaving at my table mean he's not mine? But if I send children away who have come from hard places, I teach them to distrust leaning on me. I teach them actually to dissociate, and I actually teach them ways that don't enhance their long-term mental health. If I've got a child who got hurt, they learn to disconnect from the hurt. Now I send them to their room. It's a world primed for dissociation. I don't mean dissociation necessarily in the mentally ill dissociation. I mean checking out. So my goal for my child when I send them away would be for them to figure out how to fix the behavior. They can't. They need me, and I need them, and we need connection. My goal when I do a time in is, look, buddy, that's not the way we're going to do that. I want you to sit right here for a few minutes and do time in. I'll be right over here washing the dishes. I'm just a few feet away. When you're ready to tell me what you did wrong and how you can do it right, say ready, and I'll come right away. So when my child, I go a very short distance away, a few feet away. Maybe I can be working on some paperwork there, or maybe I can be doing the dishes. But whatever it is, my child is close by me. Now in a few minutes, that child says, I'm ready. And I go and I kneel down or lean down and I take the child's hands. I said, tell me, buddy, what did you do wrong? And maybe the child would say, if he'd been sassy, I was using mean words. And you'd say, yeah, they were mean. Do you want to try it again? How could you do that right? Well, I could use my good words. Now the child has a chance to do the redo. That child has been with me from the beginning of that behavioral issue to the end of the behavioral issue. I got to mentor their brain. I got to tell them that I will not abandon them when they're bad. They're always my kiddo. I'm going to always be there. And you can always count on me, but that behavior is not okay. Let's try it again. So time in teaches my child how to problem solve for life. That is, let's go to the problem, let's work it out together. Remember, you're teaching your child strategies when they're 4 for when they're 14 and 40. So choose your strategies wisely. If you cut your child off and send them away when they misbehave, you can expect your 14-year-old to shut you down and out when you're not making the best choices as a parent. So time in teaches my child, come here, I'm going to help you. We're going to work on this together. It's a vastly different message than sending a child away.
But a few things with this. The unintended message of a timeout is when I have a problem, I go away from relationship. So especially with kids who have broken attachments, and the pattern is already when things get bad, you separate, you disconnect, you cut yourself off because attachment, closeness, relationship can feel scary. It can feel not so good, not so healthy. So that tendency is already there within those kids. If we send those kids to timeout, it's number one, it's kind of reinforcing that negative attachment style that's already there, but also it puts them in that place, like she said, where it's ripe for dissociation. It says, fix this on your own, basically kind of reinforcing that dismissiveness that when you have problems, you just go to yourself to fix it. As opposed to a time in, what we're hoping to teach is that when I have problems, where do I go? I go towards my close relationships. So when they're having a problem, having this difficulty, just that little bit of shift of I see you, I notice this is going on, I'm not ignoring it. However, what we're going to do is we're going to come together. You're going to stay right here with me while we fix this, and we're going to take some time. Some have even asked, is it ever okay for a grown-up to take a timeout? You feel so dysregulated and your lid's flipped that sometimes timeout is more of a strategy for ourselves to get calm and regulated. That's fine too. If that happens, that would be a great moment to communicate really openly to your kiddos. Hey kiddo, I'm going to take some space for myself. To get myself in a calm, good, regulated space. You're demonstrating some positive skills, but you're doing it really out loud. You're not just leaving, because they've had the just leaving before. So you're going to demonstrate something different. I'm here. But if you're able to get yourself in a good space, do the time in, keep them right there with you. When they're ready to talk about it, you talk through what's happening, and then you're on your way. My favorite. So some words about manipulation. This comes up constantly. I've had more questions about this, about what do we do with manipulative behaviors from kids when kids are manipulating us, I get it. I mean, no one likes to feel manipulated. When you feel like a kid is trying to work you or try to pull something over on you, first of all, if you know that that's happening, that's a pretty good sign that they're not a good manipulator. If they were, you wouldn't know that you're being manipulated, right? So the falling down on the ground, the kicking, the screaming, those sorts of things, that I'm just trying to get my way sorts of things. Think about that. If that's the only tool you had to get your basic needs met, and you feel like every time you've got a need, that's the only tool that you have to use, that would make life awfully tough, awfully difficult. So we're going to watch another video, but I want you to think about this. Just because you feel manipulated by your kid's behavior does not mean that manipulation was their intent. That may not have been their intention at all, especially if there's trauma in the mix. So we'll have a little bit more explanations here from Dr. Purvis about manipulation.
Primary tools for children who didn't have a voice are manipulation and control. Now, all children explore manipulation, even in the most loving homes. All children explore control in even the most loving homes. Again, this is a normal developmental exploration. For the child from the hard place, manipulation may have become the way they believe they survived. Control may be what they believe stood between them and death. Now, when we look at a child with these issues, obviously those issues are not okay. But again, I don't want to overreact. I don't want to label my child a controller or a manipulator. I want to stand back from the behavior and realize it has a function. So if a child is saying something to me, for example, they want something, but they're using a manipulative round to get there, I will say, well, stop, sweetie. Now I'm going to be matching. I'm going to be looking into their eyes, and I'm going to say, now, whoa, stop. I want to meet your need, but I need honest words, not this little roundabout. Okay, so give me honest words. Let me see what we can do. Let's work it out together. And very often I will find a child say, well, I really want X. Now, if it's in my power at that moment, I'm going to say yes, because I want my child to know they don't have to use tricks to be heard by me. Now, I can't always say yes, obviously. I shouldn't always say yes, but I can say it a lot more often than I do. So we know from child development that there's a continuum of two poles that predict the best development long term: predictability and control. So some of our children have come from very unpredictable environments. Some of them have come from very controlling environments. But appropriate levels of predictability and control will help our children let go of the need to control the world. We have mothers who come to us saying, my child tells me what shoes to wear in the morning. See, so I say to that child, you know what, it's not okay for you to tell mommy what to wear, but let's go to your room and choose what you'll wear tomorrow. So I'm going to take away control of the world by giving my child appropriate control. Every one of our children must have appropriate control in their environment, and they must be able to predict what's going to happen. So I can take away these tools by giving, I can take away manipulation and control by giving my child appropriate levels of predictability and control in their environment. I can become their partner. Again, it's very important to come alongside of the child. It's not like, aha, gotcha, being bad, but rather, sweetie, let's work on this together. That's not okay. I'm listening to you. Tell me what you need. So one of the primary mistakes that parents make about this is thinking, my child is so controlling, I'm going to take away control of everything. And see, they're going to learn to make good choices by making small choices. I remember one darling little girl we worked with who had to be in control of everything, and she was just a tiny little bitty snippet of a thing. She was like 5 years old. But her mother was there, and I was there with her in the home, and her mother said, sweetie, we're going to have a peanut butter sandwich for lunch. Come on to the table. And she said, no, I have a better idea. Let's have a peanut butter sandwich for lunch. The little thing just had to feel like she was in control. And so we got down at her height and we looked her in the eye and said, no, Mama already decided on the sandwich, but you can decide between these 3 fruits for our dessert. What do you choose? So see, I'm going to let a child have some control. I'm sharing power. They're going to practice making choices in a controlled environment so that they don't have to take over the world. I have had a child come, for example, to our camp who was hungry many, many times. He would come into the camp door every morning asking exactly what we would have to eat all day long. And I went through what we would have for the morning snack and what we would have for the noon snack and what we would have all day long. And I did that with him for a number of days, more than a week. Every day I went through. And one morning he came in and I said, sweetheart, today, would you go with me and look in the kitchen and let me show you? We have so very much food. And I promise you, you're never going to be hungry here. But just for today, would you trust Miss Karen? I'm going to meet every hunger need you have. And you just get to be a little boy today. So for that little period of time, that little boy could practice trusting me just that long, just a few hours, that there was plenty to eat. Our children learn to make good choices as they trust that they have a voice and as they trust that we see what they need. And in that environment, they will give up control and manipulation in terms of relationship.
Manipulation and control are issues that really challenge a lot of parents. I know they do me and my wife. When my kids are exhibiting manipulative and controlling behaviors, I often take that as a personal offense. I take it as a challenge to my authority. I take it as a challenge to my role as dad. And while manipulation and control are not okay when they're exhibited by our kids, I can't allow all of the emotions and the reactions that I feel to get in the way of looking deeper, below the surface of that manipulation and control, to see what's really going on. What is it that my kids are trying to tell me? What is it that they really need? The truth is that manipulation and control by our kids is often really just their way of inappropriately expressing a need. And if I can get past the personal affront and the personal offense that manipulation and control represents for me, and get to the heart of that need, help them understand that I'm here to meet that need, to help them meet that need, and more importantly, to help them appropriately express that need, then oftentimes what we can do is we can deal with the manipulation and control, not by coming down heavy and hard on it, but rather becoming more connected so that we can help our kids understand that we're their advocate, we're their coach, and we can help them both identify, articulate, and meet the deep needs that they have.
So this is a good thing to remember. Behaviors that look controlling, disorganized, angry, or manipulative may be related to underlying trauma, not necessarily willful or intentional. I like to think about that in terms of fear. A lot of times fear is a gigantic motivator. Sometimes the most explosive meltdowns, the crisis intervention work that I did where I would came on the scene, most of the time, the most explosive to the point of violent interventions that were, or behaviors were related to something fear-based, something that was fearful for the kiddo. So it puts them right down into that red brain, fight or flight. So you're likely to get angry, manipulative behaviors, or that I feel like something's not fair, I feel like something's not right. So kids who have had to control everything, they might feel that need. Control is a really good sign that there's probably some fear underneath there somewhere. So recognizing it, this is where you get curious. Recognize, be the coach of a parent and recognize we've got a behavior here. Let's dig a little deeper. What's underneath there? Manipulation, most of the time, there is a felt attachment need that's there. They're not so good at getting those needs met. So working with them is a great idea. I love what she mentioned about you don't have to control the whole world, but you can control a few things. You know, them not taking you hostage, you not taking them hostage. We can share some power and work together in this. A question came in just a minute ago about teens and the time in issue. And if you're doing timeouts with your teens, it could be that it could be for some good reasons, and the time in may or may not work with them as well. They might need something a little different, just developmentally than a timeout or a time in. There's some other techniques around giving them a safe space to go. If there's a meltdown, if there's difficulty with emotions, practicing, planning, finding a safe place in the house that they can go that is theirs. And you may need to practice this when things are calm. And what this does is that gives them that sense of control that they may be desperately needing. It allows them to save face. It allows them to not become embarrassed or upset if they're overly emotional in the situation. And you don't ever take that space away from them. Never, not as a punishment, not as a consequence. This is like sacred ground. So I would recommend maybe doing that safe place sort of thing with your teenagers. So if you know if they get escalated to a certain point, they can go there themselves. They might need a few helpful reminders from you in that time to take some space to be able to work on that. Now, the older ones, the teens, they're going to be a little bit better at recognizing some of the things cognitively that are going on, some thoughts, some feelings, but they also may need you also. So even if you do give them that space, you're present, you're there, you're not just saying go to your room and shut your door. You're allowing that connection to happen kind of as needed. So, yeah, provide safety, take away the need for controlling the world, letting them control some things, making choices if they need to, doing redos, even the safe place for teens. That can be a good way to help provide safety for them. All right, so I've got another activity here for you on again, page 62. So activity 2. And we're actually we're running a little bit low on time. So I'm just going to explain this to you, and I'm going to ask that you do this on your own time, these next two when you have an opportunity. So what I'd like for you to do is take a moment, if you're co-parenting with someone, talk about your kiddo. Identify what attachment styles best describe your child. So this is going to help you with the curiosity piece, what may be going on underneath these behaviors. So once you kind of figure out what may be going on, are they secure, avoidant, anxious, fearful, and disorganized, try to see what that may be communicated through in their behaviors. So with understanding and insight in mind, what are some ways you could try to meet your child's attachment needs, taking away the need to control the whole world? Sometimes they do need a little bit of healthy disconnection. Sometimes they need a lot of attention. They might be that anxious style that thinks that you and everyone else is going to just disappear if they're not seen and known. So pay attention to what it is. So when you got a few spare moments after this or sometime this week, think about this. Really dig into what kind of attachment style your child or children have. What are the underlying messages that may be presented through that style, and what can you do to help meet that attachment need? Now, the next thing is looking at correction. So, as mentioned before, all behavior is a subtle or not so subtle means of communicating underlying felt need. Think about specific behaviors going on in your home, in the present, and what may be the need that behavior is trying in dysfunctional ways to communicate. If it's lying, if it's stealing, if it's swearing, if it's hoarding food, if it's hitting, whatever it is, think about the behavior, then be that detective, that kind of emotional detective with your kid. You're trying to figure out what's going on for them. So just be curious. Talk about it with your partner or with a friend or with someone you talk about stuff that goes on with your kids about that behavior that keeps happening. What might be the communication underneath that? All right. Speaking of lying, this is another good hot button. We're hitting all the hits tonight. So the control, consequences, how to deal with manipulation, and now how to deal with lying. So we're going to watch another video here with Karen Purvis, some really practical, hands-on strategies for dealing with lying.
There's a developmental stage at about 4 to 6 where kids are going to explore the truth. If the child didn't go through a normal developmental sequence at 4 to 6, they may explore it much older. So you may bring home an adolescent who's never had the normal developmental trajectory, and they may explore the boundaries of the truth. So a first thing to bear in mind is that exploring the parameters of what's really true is part of the developmental sequence. A second thing to remember is you need to be thinking about your own example, because, for example, if your child picks up the phone and says, "Mom, it's so-and-so," and you say, "Tell her I'm not home," it's going to be really pretty hard for you to hold your child accountable to a high level of truth. A third thing to bear in mind is the purposes of misbehavior. There's always a reason and a purpose. There's always a function for misbehavior for us as well as for our children. For a child of any age, a misbehavior has either a conscious or an unconscious purpose, a goal in mind. So I have to explore as a caregiver, as a parent, does my child believe they have to lie to get this need met? Or is my child fearful of my reactivity? Have I been overreactive in the past? So if you bear in mind now, that does not mean we don't address the behavior. It simply means that we address it with balance and insight. So those three things, and then a final thing is my goal is to teach my child skills for life. And honest communication with trust and integrity is obviously a goal for life. So I might say to a child, a young child who's telling me a story, "Sweetie, is that real or pretend?" And they might be able to recalibrate as we redefine real and pretend. I might be able to say something clever and humorous like, "Really? Wow. Do you want to think about that and try it again?" I might even give a child time to think about it, say, "You know, that isn't what I thought I saw happen. Would you like to go think about it for a little while and come back to me when you've had a chance to think about it and tell me what you think really happened?" So my goal is a balance of structure and nurture. I'm going to address any misbehavior, but I want to do it in the context of balance. It's really important as parents look for how to help their children develop long-term strategies for integrity in their relationships with each other, with family members and God. It's really important for us to remember that we want to celebrate the good and not have joy in, "Aha, I caught you." Okay. We're taught by Scripture, by the heart of God, that God rejoices and that God's love rejoices in the good. It doesn't rejoice in evil. So let your child see your joy in helping them succeed. My experience with children who tell stories and outright lies is that when they understand, I'm here to help you succeed, I'm going to work with you, you need to work with me. Let's work this out together. That a child will come forward to tell the truth, and then let me help them solve the problem or the need that was driving that lie. The two primary errors that I see with parents when their children lie is that they either overreact or they don't react at all. And neither one of those is an appropriate response. We need to do a balance of structure and nurture. We need to do a balance of responsiveness and proactively addressing these needs as parents who are teaching our children patterns for life.
Well, you just want to spend time with her. I love how she talks. Balance of nurture, balance of structure. Aim for connected ways to address lying rather than overreacting or no reaction, and try these responses. Was that real or pretend? Keeping it playful. Just, it says, I see what you said, and I kind of get the idea that maybe it's not accurate. I'm not going to call you right out on it, but this is again, kind of that same philosophy of a redo. It's, I notice, was this real or pretend? And for some kids, especially if they're still kind of figuring out what that is, that can be useful. Can you think about that again for a minute? And let's try that again, spirit of the redo. And also remember that exploring what's true and false is a developmental process for younger kids, but also think about kids who have experienced trauma a lot of times are developmentally sometimes half of their chronological age. So they might be exploring this lying thing a little bit later in life than some others might. So, so these are 3 really good ways to address the lying. I want you to practice this. There's an activity on this as well. Do this afterwards or sometime. Find somebody and just practice it. Get them to lie to you. Tell you a flat out lie, and then just practice using one of these strategies. And then switch and then give it another try. Was it real or pretend? Can you think about that for a minute? Let's try it again. Two other thoughts about lying. One is thinking about lying in terms of kids who had to use lies in order to keep themselves or their family members safe or not arrested, or it's life and death sorts of things sometimes. So sometimes lying was a pattern that they saw that was actually felt helpful in some ways. So keeping in mind that if you're yanking away that tool, when that's been something that's been helpful for a long time, that can be a really tough process. Again, not saying you shouldn't do it, but realize that it's going to be, again, kind of an uphill battle, and realizing it's not just a willful lying child. It's a kid who maybe had learned a culture that was not so good. Also, I want to just mention quickly about a condition called confabulation that's often associated with fetal alcohol spectrum of disorders. A lot of people ask questions, what about meth exposure, heroin exposure, opiates? Lots of other things cause a lot of prenatal conditions. Fetal alcohol spectrum of disorders is a little bit more specific. There's been a lot of research done on it. And this condition known as confabulation is pretty specific to the alcohol exposure. But keep in mind, a lot of times if there were other drugs used, there might have been alcohol prenatally as well. What confabulation is it's there's a part of the brain that kind of acts like the fact checker for you all the time. It's kind of checking with reality, with what's happening right now, with what's happened all the times previously in your life. And what happens in confabulation is that part's kind of broken. It's not working so well. And what it will do is actually drop parts of your story out. And it doesn't like that. It doesn't like that there's parts that are missing. So sometimes it'll just grab any old memory and it'll yank it into the story. So like an example is you see your kiddo reach over and take a cookie out of the cookie jar and take a bite out of it. And you ask them, why did you take the cookie? And they said, I didn't take the cookie, right? And you saw it with your eyes. And you feel like it's this very bold-faced, like affront to you and your authority. And if this confabulation is going on, what may have happened is that they may have actually dropped part of that literal story out of the scenario. So let's say, well, you've got a cookie. I see it in your hand. Where'd you get the cookie? And the kid says, well, Grandpa gave it to me. Grandpa lives in California, and you're here in Oregon. And they're like, well, I know that Grandpa didn't give you the cookie. And the kid swears up and down, I swear, and this is what happened. Grandpa gave me the cookie. That's why I've got the cookie. You may get the tears. What may have happened is that maybe the kiddo pulled in a memory of one day Grandpa gave him a cookie, and that's just what happened to fit in there at that time. Can you see how this would be terribly frustrating for you? Because it's like, who do I believe, you or my lying eyes, or the kiddo whose brain is playing tricks on them because of this condition that they did not ask for, and it's so very confusing. So I want to put this out there. If you know that there's prenatal exposure to alcohol with your kiddo and lying has been a problem, this may be something to get some further assistance in and around, to get some help with some strategies. Because kiddos, this is not something that gets fixed. This is an organic brain injury that happens, and it takes a lot of knowledge, a lot of patience, a lot of understanding on the caregiver's part, and a lot of training of some coping skills, because some parts of life are going to be pretty difficult for some of these kiddos. All right, we're getting down to it. So saying no with style. We're going to watch this one. This is a lady named Barbara Coloroso that has some really good ways of saying no, setting limits with her kiddos.
The word that kind of comes spewing out of my mouth without question is no.
Yeah.
Don't. Bad in Barbara Russo's.
We just say it too often.
Yeah.
We say, Mom, can I have a cookie? No, it'll spoil your supper. Dad, can I go over to Jamie's house? No. Mom, can I have the car keys? No. Dad, can I stay out all night? No. They
I'm
don't
going to
take
say
us
now,
seriously.
What part of no don't you understand?
That's a brick wall, yes. A good brick wall response. They never take us seriously on the big one when we really need to say no. If we keep changing our minds on the little ones or say no all the time. One little boy, somebody said, what's your name? He said, No Johnny. I mean, he really believed his name was No Johnny. But there are 3 alternatives you can use instead of saying no right away. So if you need to say no, you can say it, mean it, and follow through with it. The first alternative, Mom, can I have a cookie? Yes, later. So you invite a yes and a later. It's hard to fight a yes later. But that little 5-year-old says, but I'm so hungry. Okay, have a cookie. It's already later at least 3 seconds. But most importantly, you didn't change a no to a yes. It was a yes all along.
Right.
And don't say and make sure you eat your supper. Because what are you going to do if they don't? Get the cookie back? I mean, the threats we make. Second alternative, Dad, can I go over to Jamie's? Give me a minute. There is nothing wrong as a parent to ask for a moment to develop your own plan. And I've always said to my kids, you need an answer right now, it's no. If you can wait a little bit, maybe. And they're more willing to wait a little bit.
I try sometimes, we'll see, and they go, whoo, that means yes. Yeah. They know that if it's not no, it's yes.
There's a chance. There's a good chance.
That arbitrary rules, grounding, for example. You just see this as
Can I give you
punishment.
the third alternative
Sure.
so they don't wonder what it
Absolutely.
is?
Go right ahead. Go right
The
ahead.
third alternative is really the one which we can get into grounding with, too. It's the one I use with adolescents. Mom, can I have the car keys? Convince me. Huh? Why should I spend all my energy at my age trying to convince my adolescent she can't have the car keys? Let her expend all her youthful energy convincing me why she should. But Mom, my friends, not convinced. Mom, you let Maria, not convinced. You don't give me the car keys, you got to take all of us to play practice. I'm convinced. And then when your 16-year-old says, can I stay out all night? The good line's no. They need limits and boundaries. I work with pregnant teens and runaways and juvenile delinquents. I've yet to meet one of them not begging somebody to say no. Give them limits and boundaries. Say you're important enough. And that's where the grounding comes in. Yes. I don't use grounding. My son, when he was in 7th grade, came home and said, Mom, what's grounding? My father's an electrician. I proceeded to explain to him what grounding meant. He said, no, my friend can't go out for 6 weeks. I said, oh, because he'd never heard that. Because we don't do it. Again, it's punishment. It's something I'm doing to a kid. Discipline, on the other hand, invites a response from a kid. For instance, you say you need to come home in time for dinner. Kid comes home late. Brick wall parent doesn't start with grounding first. He says, okay, logical consequence, no supper. You don't eat till breakfast, which is punishment. And then the kid says, I got enough food in my room. Young man with that kind of lip, you're grounded for 6 weeks. So now you got him home for 6 weeks because he didn't show up in time for dinner. Has not solved his showing up on time for dinner. The jellyfish parent says, oh, honey, those noodles are terribly soggy now. Let me fix you some new ones. Parents from a brick wall family are going to say, fat chance, woman. But a backbone parent looks at a kid and says, you're late for dinner. If they're old enough to be late for dinner, they're old enough to eat it cold, heat it up, or fix something else and clean up your mess. I use the French term, répondez s'il vous plaît. Please respond. Consequences need to be 4 things. RSVP. Reasonable, simple, valuable, and practical. They should be more work for the kid than they are for you. And you say, okay, but what if he's still late the next day? Then I say to the kid, you have a problem, and I know you can handle it. Always believing the child can handle it. And I say, do you need a watch? Do you need some kind of reminder to get home on time? Because I don't think the kid's staying over at his friend saying, you know, I think I'm going to drive my mother batty. I think I'm going to be late for dinner. No, they're out having a great time. But do you need some kind of structure so that you can be on time? And you talk to the kid about, it's really important. It's the only meal we share together. It's got to make sense why you want them. But then what if they're still late? That's the one that parents say, yeah, but I got an ornery kid, still going to be late. Then I said to him, you know what? You've been late 3 times this week. And I really need you to be home on time for dinner because as a family, we need to have this only time together. So the next 2 days, when you come home from school, you need to stay home. Now, you can bring your friends over. This is not punishment. You can bring your friends over to play, but I would like you to be here for dinner. And during these 2 days, you have a job to do. I want you to be thinking about next Monday, when you get to go out to your friends again, how you're going to handle it, because I believe you can. Do you see the difference there? Empowering a kid, saying, you know what, I believe you can do it, kid. We have to tighten up the limits and boundaries when you keep blowing it.
So the parenting and limits, these are just good things to keep in mind, just in terms of having a frame of reference. The brick wall means my way or the highway, just no moving at all, no flexibility. Jellyfish says, yeah, do what you want. And the backbone is really what we're shooting for. This fits really well with the collaborative problem-solving model, where we're getting our expectations met, but also working with the kids. We're sharing power. We're not being held hostage by them. We're not holding them hostage either. So our backbone is firm, but flexible, right? We can move. This is a good thing. If you're going to use consequences, keep this in mind. Make sure that they're reasonable, simple, valuable, and practical. This is all listed in your notebook as well, so those should be there for you to, if you want to read a little bit more about that, take some notes on that as well. So make sure it's reasonable, simple, valuable, and practical. Our alternatives to no. I think this is great. Yes, later. This is a good one. Give me a minute. I really like this one. I use a lot of times, where it's like, if it's really that pressing, give me a minute means I need to think about it. I need to connect with mom. We need to talk about it. And if it's worth waiting for, it's worth waiting for. And convince me, especially with our kids who are wanting to do that connection, that communication. Talk to me about it. What's important to you about this? Could roll right into a great Plan B communication as well. So keep these things in mind. I'll wrap up here. Attachment wounds and broken trust often lead to survival-based behaviors. Trust and positive attachment narratives must be rebuilt and nurtured. So this is your opportunity to help rebuild those attachment narratives and build the structure that they need in order for that to happen. Not so much structure that they can't choose anything for themselves. That leads them to think, I've got to control things and get in there and try those dysfunctional manipulations to get it met. But we're going to give them some space, and we're going to share this together. Negative behaviors are always a means of communication. Children are often trying their very best to let you know about some unmet needs. Ask yourself if you want to be a warden or a coach. Behaviors can be changed through positive means and empower, build trust, improve attachment, and improve attachment narratives. Also, instead of overreacting to lies or not reacting at all, where you could put any behavior in there, overreacting to swearing, overreacting to any of these sorts of things that happen, or underreacting. We want to find the right dose of reactivity. We want to pay attention, let them know that we care, that they're seen, they're understood, that they're felt, and that they're known, and that we're going to be there to help them get those needs met. Next week, like I said, we're going to wrap it up, folks, with some talk about grief and loss, and some ways to be very, very kind to ourselves, and also some ways to be very kind and nurturing to our children, because we're both in kind of this great unknown. We don't know how the story is going to end for our kids or for us. So having some good awareness of our feelings and some steps to pay attention and be mindful and care for yourself as a parent who is doing very, very hard work for kiddos in our community. I think this will be a great time together. So we will be back, and barring any snow or weather, we'll be back at all of our locations next week. Have a great and wonderful week. Try out some of those activities this week. There's some activities there and some action steps to take using these things that we've looked at tonight. There's also a new share button on both on the email and on the website. I would love to hear some more stories. We're hearing some really wonderful, powerful things that are happening right now. So send me some stories. Give it a try. Have a great week. Stay warm. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.